All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I am Andrew, aka Asteroid Mindgasms, for the purposes of this video. I'm going to talk about a clip recently from a podcast called Trigonometry with Konstantin Kisin and Francis Foster, who are one of them is a comedian and one of them is a former teacher. They're both in the UK and they have a podcast called Trigonometry, which is okay. It's basically just one of those which is just an endless stream of, bro, wokeness bad. Yeah, I get it. Those anti-SJWs get just as annoying as the SJWs to me sometimes. But yeah, I agree. Wokeness bad. Anyway, that's kind of beside the point. So I'm going to talk about a clip from their podcast in which they're interviewing Sam Harris, of course, the famous public intellectual, even though a lot of his opinions are tremendously fucking stupid. Um, and how he thinks that conspiracies against Trump getting democratically elected are okay because Trump is literally equivalent to an asteroid headed towards Earth to destroy it. So obviously that's some pretty fucking tremendously hyperbolic bullshit, as I like to say. So I'm just going to show him commenting on that a little bit and comment on that myself a little bit. And of course, most of you watching this, of course, know that Sam Harris is a famous militant atheist and neuroscientist and apparently a philosopher, although his understanding of philosophy is fucking atrocious and he never gets the details right. And I say this as an atheist myself who has long ago learned the tremendous errors of militant atheism, which is why I'm not militant about any of my non-religious views, because that's just as stupid as being an evangelical Christian or evangelical religious person of any kind. And his neuroscience degree was extremely questionable, and he never writes books anymore. But I do like his one book called Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion, because I think spirituality, as much as that's kind of like a woke new age cringy term, is an important part for people's lives, but it doesn't have to be in a religious context. So I do appreciate some of what Sam Harris does. But anyway, let's get into this clip.
I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like, there's no.
Holy shit. Okay, so I think that they're talking about the FBI having raided Trump to get those documents recently. They raided Mar-a-Lago, and of course there's this unconfirmed rumor, which might just be ridiculous propaganda from the other side or some shit, about how Trump supposedly had nuclear documents, and even some people are speculating about him trying to sell them somewhere. Now, I agree with people who criticize this, saying that I don't think even Trump is that fucking stupid. I mean, he's a bumbling, incompetent narcissist, but I don't think he's quite stupid enough to do something like that. And I haven't seen any confirmed evidence for any of this shit, so it's likely just bullshit. But even for, like, actually, let's say he's talking about January 6th here, because that would make more sense. Because, full disclosure, I don't actually know what he's commenting on here. This is just the clip that I found of it. But let's say he's talking about January 6th, right? So if you be as charitable as possible and say that this actually was insurrection and an attempted coup on the U.S. government from Trump supporters, then he's literally saying then that Trump, or that Hunter Biden, the son of the current president of the US, Joe Biden, of course, could be literally hiding dead children's bodies in his basement. And that would not be as bad as Trump speaking out of both sides of his mouth, but egging on the Trump supporter and crazy QAnon people to assaulting the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. on January 6th last year, which it seemed like a Trump type of coup if it was one, in that it was totally disorganized and basically destined to fail. But one person on each side did die, one of the Trump supporter women, and one security guard. And even if no one had been harmed at all, violence does not solve problems. And it's a hell of a fucking stupid way to attempt to solve political problems. But still, even if you give the most charitable, or I guess you should say the least charitable possible interpretation of what happened on January 6th, that it was literally an attempted and organized coup ahead of time. To me, that's still not as bad as Hunter Biden hiding children's bodies in his fucking basement. This is what annoys me about fucking public intellectuals like Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay, which is why I criticize these people in the former so-called intellectual dark web or IDW all the time, because a lot of these public intellectuals' opinions are tremendously fucking stupid. It's tremendously fucking stupid to think that January 6th, for example, is not as bad, or no, January 6th is worse than than it would be if Hunter Biden were hiding children's bodies in his basement. That's fucking insane.
Nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right? Or China, it is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun.
So how does he know that? Like, I'm sure as fuck not saying that Biden is more corrupt than Trump. I think that Trump is more corrupt than Biden simply because he's so fucking selfish and he wants to pursue his own self-interest as much as possible. Biden, I'm sure, is doing that a hell of a lot too, but he actually, feigns at least some, and probably very likely does have some interest in the preservation of democracy and that kind of shit. And I'm sure he's financially corrupt by oil companies and weapons manufacturers and all that shit, just like all politicians are, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, basically. And he's done a bunch of terrible shit, like instituting the 1994 crime bill, and he's still continued all of these drone strikes overseas, even though he should get credit for ending the war in Afghanistan. And Trump also likewise should get credit for starting that process, even though he is fucking terrible and I don't like him at all. But anyway, I really think, again, Sam Harris is being tremendously hyperbolic with this comparison here. I don't think that even though he's admitting that Biden is corrupt too, I don't think that Trump is like, basically he's saying that Trump is exponentially more corrupt than Biden. I don't think so. I think he's more corrupt, but not to that extent. That's way too much of an exaggeration.
Right? I mean, like there's just it doesn't even stack up against Trump University, right? Trump University as a story is worse.
You see what he just said there? He said, okay, so like before that, he said Hunter Biden hiding children's dead bodies, or at least let's assume he doesn't mean that exactly, and just assume that he means specifically the corruption of Joe Biden that pales in comparison to just Trump University. So I'm not sure about that. I mean, Trump University was literally tax fraud, and they had to and Trump and uh, the people who ran the business had to pay out millions to people who got scammed through it, because it literally is a scam, and Trump literally is a con artist. But I don't know how he's doing his math here, and how he's quantifying that. I mean, like, basically every business venture Trump has done has been some sort of fucking corruption or scam or something like that. But I think you might have to go farther than just Trump University to equal Joe Biden's corruption. Remember how long Joe Biden's political career has been. It's been decades and decades and decades of, to be fair, apparently he was one of the people against escalating the war in, I think it was Iraq, during Obama's presidency. And I think I think it was Afghanistan, which is related to why later he eventually ended the war in Afghanistan, because one of his sons died in the Afghanistan war, I think. I'm not 100% sure about the details. But anyway, all of that aside, with all of the wars that he's been directly and indirectly involved in, going back to when he was vice president under Obama, and even though he protested the escalation of troop buildup in Afghanistan under Obama, he still like signed off on tons of war in other Middle Eastern countries and like technically illegal drone strikes and all that kind of shit, right? So, I mean, he probably is responsible for a lot more dead bodies than Trump is, I would say, even though Trump is responsible. Like, they're both fucking war criminals, in my opinion, and should be in jail for the rest of their lives anyway.
Worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop, in my view, right? Now, that doesn't answer the people who say.
So he just said that Trump University is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop. So they're like, it's possible that the worst that's on there is him doing drugs and having sex with hookers. And in that case, in my opinion, who fucking cares? Like, if you want to do drugs and fuck hookers, I think anyone should be allowed to do that if they want to. I think those things should be legal. But there are unconfirmed rumors that I've talked about before that he allegedly even had child pornography on there. So that's, like I said, that's an unconfirmed rumor. But if he does have something like that, for the sake of argument, just let's say if he has child porn on his computer, I think that's exponentially fucking worse than the tax fraud and scam that Trump University was. Both are really fucking bad, but child porn is way fucking worse than Trump University. I think if you explain that to Sam Harris that way, to be fair, he might agree with you. But he also is so politically fucking biased that he probably thinks that there's no chance of that being the case, and therefore there's no chance that Trump University alone is not way exponentially more corrupted than Biden's entire political career, even though we're measuring like 4 years against, I don't know, 40 or something. Obviously, he's only been president for 2 years, and he was only vice president for 8, I think, but he's been like in Congress and the Senate for decades, and he's passed legislation and all that kind of shit. So anyway, comparing Trump University to the the best of what could be on Hunter Biden's laptop, if it's coke and heroin and crack and hookers or whatever, I would agree. But if it's the worst, like child pornography, that's not even fucking remotely true. The exact opposite of that is true, because child porn is way fucking worse than Trump University.
It's still completely unfair to not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account like that. That's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, right? But I think it was warranted.
Well, I think he's right about that. But wait, he said it's warranted?
Right. And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not
that was warranted. Okay, so he literally thinks that suppressing the infamous Hunter Biden laptop story that happened before the 2020 election was a left-wing conspiracy, but it was warranted because he's about to say the headline of this whole thing, that this left-wing conspiracy of censoring information to increase the chances of Trump losing is okay because Trump is literally the equivalent of an asteroid headed toward Earth. That's the comparison he's about to make to justify his ridiculous claim there.
Sam, I'm sorry.
That particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just said something I really struggle with there, which is
the kids in the basement.
Fuck the kids in the basement. I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, but the thing is,
so now he's changing what he just said, but that is what he just said. He literally just said that the Hunter Biden laptop story being censored from the New York Post, being censored on Twitter, and you not being allowed to share the link with anyone, being censored on Twitter leading up to the 2020 election, was a left-wing conspiracy, and that was warranted because Trump is so much worse than Biden, to the point that Trump University is exponentially worse than anything bad that or corrupt that Biden has ever done in his entire political career. That's how much of a hyperbolic claim he's making. But now he seems to be walking it back.
This is just not left wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left wing, right?
Even
Liz
though you just said it was left wing like 10 seconds ago.
Cheney's
You're
doing
content with a
everything in her power
conspiracy to prevent somebody
No,
being
but
democratically
it's not
elected.
but there's nothing conspiracy. It's not. It was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it was. It doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like if
What are you
people
even
get
talking
together
about
and
now?
talk about what should we do about this phenomenon.
This is some word salad that's not answering the question right now.
If it's like if there was an asteroid hurtling toward Earth.
There you go, asteroid.
And we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy? You know, like some of
Yeah, so he literally compared Trump to an asteroid hurtling toward Earth to destroy it, and used that to justify how it would be okay to openly conspire to stop this asteroid heading toward Earth. Now, of course, if that were actually the case, if we're not talking about a metaphor here, if there were actually an asteroid heading toward Earth, we would want to get the world working together to deflect that asteroid and prevent it from fucking destroying the planet and killing everyone, right? So that's true. But that's a fucking poor metaphor because, well, I agree that Trump was a terrible president and he's a terrible person. Although I think people conflate that too and use the latter as evidence for the former, even though him like using lazy rhetoric sure as fuck does not mean he was anywhere near as evil or anywhere near as responsible for as much death as George W. Bush and everyone in his administration, even though he was really fucking bad. He just had worse rhetoric. But again, he's not like exponentially worse than Biden to the point that literally Trump University is worse than any bad thing and anything corrupt that Joe Biden has ever done in his entire political career. And also, as he said, even if Hunter Biden were hiding children's dead bodies in his basement, that sure as fuck would not be that sure as fuck would be a hell of a lot worse than Trump University and probably anything that Trump's done. Unless he actually was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, because he was seen palling around with him, but so was Bill Clinton, and so was Bill Gates. Like there was bipartisan support of Jeffrey Epstein. But anyway, the point is that Sam Harris is making a fucking ridiculously hyperbolic claim. It's not okay to conspire to stop Trump from being elected because he, as bad of a person and as bad of a president as he is not the equivalent of an asteroid hurtling towards Earth to destroy it. He's fucking got Trump derangement syndrome. As much as I hate it when conservatives say that, because they say that about everyone who criticizes Trump, Sam Harris is way too hyperbolic about how bad he thinks Trump is. All right. Anyway, hope you found that entertaining and hilarious how hyperbolic the supposedly super smart genius public intellectual Sam Harris is. One of countless examples of how he makes terrible arguments based on tremendously sloppy logic. So click that like button, share this everywhere, subscribe to the channel, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. And the next one I'll probably do will be another more nerdy book episode. I'll be continuing the series I'm doing on the famous Marxist / Hegelian / Lacanian philosopher Slavoj Žižek's book called Less Than Nothing, in which he has some really interesting and controversial takes on philosophy and theology, and along with many other subjects. And I'm trying to use that as my attempt at using other philosophers' exploration of Hegel to learn more about his philosophy. So look forward to that as well. And then on this weekend, ideally, Dusty and Chris and I will finally be doing our movie chat on the documentary called Reversing Roe, about the decades-long process of the so-called groups, evangelical Christian groups like the so-called moral majority, pressuring Republicans to do an endless series of legislation which led to the recent overturning of Roe versus Wade in America. And yeah, check out the link for my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video, as always. And if you give me $10 a month, then you can vote on future topics, books, and movies that I discuss both by myself and with others. And like I always say, most importantly, always remember this. I love you all. The funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And Sam Harris is not smart. He's a fucking dumbass. All right. So thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.